Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Purple Stage here at Ventec Live. Firstly, before I introduce our next presenter, I just want to remind you all that you can submit your questions, whether you're joining us online or here live in the audience, via the platform. There'll be a QR code coming up here on the screen in a second. So you can submit your questions throughout the session, and we'll be answering those throughout the session and afterwards as well. But without further ado, I want to introduce you to Danny Stevens, CEO and founder of Field Drive. He'll be talking about We're Live and Somebody is Watching Me.
Thank you. Good morning. Join in. The more the merrier. So, good morning. I'm Danny Stevens from Field Drive, and the idea here is to give you an overview of track and trace technologies you can use in your events. And we've seen during the virtual era that measuring a virtual event is pretty straightforward. Yes, you can measure every click, you can measure every interaction, every virtual booth exhibitor, and get quite detailed reporting out of it. And now we see an increased interest from clients on asking themselves, how can we transfer this into the in-person events and get more live data out of events? So what we're going to do today is look at how can we track simultaneously virtual events and in-person events and bring them together in one reporting dashboard, so you get an overview of your hybrid environment with all the interactions that are happening. The first thing you have to ask yourself is, what is your objective? And I think that's the most important question when you're using track and trace technologies. What are we going to use the data for, and how are we going to deploy it afterwards? We've seen examples where at the Brussels Motor Show, Audi, Volkswagen and everything were actually tagging people with NFC cards. They had like 16,000 qualified contacts, and we contacted them 3 months later to have a debrief, and we asked them, what have you done with the data? Well, actually nothing, because we didn't have the resources to follow up on it. So deploying technology should not be for the purpose of the technology, but actually like, what is the outcome going to be? Am I going to integrate this with my sales force? Am I going to drive my marketing department with it? And make sure you have clear objectives on the technology you want to use, because it's not about the technology. The technology is actually the means of getting that data and fulfilling that objective. So that's the first thing you should ask yourself. What do I want to use the data for? And when do I need it? Do I need it live at the event, or is it something that I can use after the event to do reporting and to improve my next events or follow up my sales? So what is your objective? Be clear and be very strict about that one. The second one is data integration. We see a lot of, no event tech company stands on itself. The technology providers are providing solutions, but the only way to get value out of it is to actually integrate the data. And we call that an API. An API is actually a code of two applications talking to each other and getting data flown from one application to the other. And it's not because if a provider says we have an API, it's like saying we have a hybrid event. It's as vague as anything. Saying we have an API is, what is this API doing? Is it a one-way? Is this application A to talking to application B in one direction, in both directions? When is the data flowing? What fields are flowing? How is the information? And what is a single source of truth? It's important to define your single source of truth. I give an example. You have an event registration system. Everybody's registering through that event registration system, whether it's Eventscase, Eventbrite, whatever you're using. You take the data, and then on the day itself you have walk-ins, people walking in and saying, oh, I haven't registered. Am I going to register on the check-in kiosk and collect another source of data and push it into my registration system? Or am I going to point out people to the Eventscase or to the other providers to register in that system and then get transferred to the kiosk? So you should always keep one source of truth for your data, in order not to mix up. So no name changes, no title changes. Keep that in one platform and define like this is the source of truth. Because if you're using a registration system, a mobile app, a networking tool, track and trace technology, facial recognition, all that data is going to be all over the place, but make sure that everything aggregates into one single source. We make a difference between two types of tracking. The first one is anonymized tracking, and the second one is identified tracking, which means that in anonymized tracking, we're going to see how the crowd moves about. Is this a sample of the crowd and just knowing how many people were in that session, but not knowing that this and this and this person were in that session? So that's two different, totally different objectives. Anonymized tracking is going to give you a sample of the crowds and see how that moves about. It could be interesting to know the footfall on your exhibition to define the booth price for the next session. Because if you have more footfall, then you have more traffic, and then that booth should be more expensive than another one. Another one is identified tracking. That's exactly knowing who has been at what place in the event at which point. And there's a lot of technologies to achieve that. You can have barcode scanning, RFID, NFC, Wi-Fi tracking, camera tracking, iBeacons, M-beacons, Apex cameras, facial recognition, aperture cameras. There's so many technologies out there. So what I'm going to do now is give you an overview of what technologies are out there and how can you use these technologies to fit your objective. And to make sure that you choose the right technology, or your provider helps you to choose the right technology and also manage your expectations. There's some technologies out there where the provider will say like, oh, this gives you a 99% accuracy on the data. The proof is in the pudding. When you look at the dashboards at the end, that's when you get proof. And I can tell you, when you need exact knowledge on where people have been, for instance, for a medical conference, you need certification that you attended this specific session. We need to know exactly when did you enter that session and when did you get out, because otherwise you won't get your accreditation for your session. It's a different objective than knowing roughly how many people were in that session for that specific speaker. So the technologies out there is one of our partners there, Exposure Analytics. Apex. So this is actually anonymized data capturing based on camera monitoring. So what they're doing is they're putting up cameras and they can actually measure how many people are in a specific area. This can be identified with either in a region by putting up multiple cameras, or just having, if you have a bigger space like this, we could put a camera at that door and at that door and actually measure how people are moving into that area by the camera passing and saying like, this is +1, +1, +1, -1, -1. So that would give you the count of how many people are exactly in this specific space. This is for dwell time, how long do people stay in a specific area, how many people are in a specific area. So that's one technology that can be used, and this is definitely anonymized tracking. The second one is Aperture Sensor. This is actually a camera. There's different technologies out there. Exposure Analytics got it, Zenith is working on it. This is actually camera tracking to identify not only the number of people in a session, but also monitor their expression, the gender, the age range. And technology has gone pretty far in that, defining demographics and defining the interaction with your audience. Wi-Fi sensors, what are they doing? This could be one box placed in the center of the room, and your mobile phone will always be looking for a Wi-Fi signal. And actually it's not connected, but it's tracking that data, and every ping you get from a mobile phone to that Wi-Fi tracker will give you a count, and this will identify how many people are in this specific area. So this is also anonymized tracking and can be used to set up heat maps, for instance. If you have these trackers everywhere on a booth in a large exhibition space like a car trade show or anything, you can actually see how people are moving about and how the flow is going. They have some nice examples in knowing that this was a featured product, this was a world premiere for a car brand, and actually see how people are moving directly into that zone, how long they are staying there. Then we move to identified tracking. Identified tracking can be as simple as a clicker at the door. Or, no, that's anonymized tracking, but identified tracking can be as simple as a scanner at the door. So scanning people in and out. I could have somebody there and somebody there, scanning people in and out, and we would know how long they have been in this specific area. It can also be lead retrieval, an exhibitor scanning people in their booth, scanning their barcode, and you would know how many people have been in that specific booth, how long they have stayed, even the interaction they have had, like with qualifiers, asking questions. So this gives you a lot of data on how exhibitors and visitors are interacting and pushing that into your system. So that's identified tracking. Identified tracking will also be used for scanning people in and out of sessions. So if I have somebody there at the door scanning people in and out, I would know how many people were in this session and how long they have actually stayed in this session. So far, only 2 people have run off, so that's pretty okay. RFID, Radio Frequency Identifier. RFID is a passive technology, so it doesn't involve the visitor to do anything. You would actually have a little tag in your badge, an RFID tag. Think about the security tags you have in a bookstore. There's the little stickers that are in the book, and you would walk out, and the RFID kids would say like, "Hey, you're a thief." Actually, it's the same, but we're going to tag that RFID tag when we print your badge. This little RFID tag has an identifier, a unique number, and we're going to link that number to your customer profile. So when you enter in a region, you have antennas, and they're sending out a signal and bouncing back that RFID signal to the antenna. And that would actually generate the count of the number of visitors entering a door, entering a zone, or even monitoring how many people are in a specific area. And you can overlap them. The problem with RFID, if we talk about reliability, is the accuracy of the data. How will it be affected? For instance, if you have your RFID badge and you have your phone in your pocket, this can interfere with the signal. If you're sweating and the RFID tag is under your skirt, it will disturb the signal. If you have multiple people walking together, if you have like an 80,000 people plenary session and you have 5 doors and 80,000 people are entering the aula, you will get data cluttering. And we've seen sessions where actually they were doing tracking with RFID. There was 18,000 chairs in the room. All the chairs were filled and the dashboard was showing 11,000 visitors. So where's the other 7,000, right? So with RFID, up till now, we have never seen a higher accuracy rate than 75-80% in identified data. So it's a great technology if that is your objective. If you only need to know roughly how many people were in the session and roughly who was in the session, but not exactly, RFID can do the job. But it's a pretty technically complicated deployment because you have to set up gates or you have to set up these pillars with RFID antennas that are deflecting the signal. So it's a pretty technically heavy setup, and all the detectors need to be connected live to the internet to aggregate all the data together. Another technology is beacons. There's been a lot to do about Bluetooth beacons, all kinds of beacons. This is actually the opposite. This is what for instance, Aventry does with their looped. They have changed the name now, but actually an NFC beacon is a wearable beacon, and it's opposite to RFID. It's not the antenna sending out a signal and deflecting. This is the beacon itself. It's a little beacon with batteries, and the beacon is sending out a signal, and that signal is captured by little antennas that are spread out in the room. So this is one of the most accurate technologies if the deployment is done correctly. But data is never 100% correct. One deployment we did with BLE beacons was, for instance, we saw a high density of people in a specific area. We thought like, oh, these booths are really busy. And when you went to see on site, actually what was happening, there was one booth giving out free teddy bears, like build your own bear, and people were actually queuing in front of those exhibitors, and that showed on the dashboard that as if there was a lot of people on those booths, but they were actually just queuing in front of the data. So what you see on a dashboard and what you see in real life is often, there's often a difference in perception. So wearable beacons can be used for sending out signals and actually tracking. And there's a cap. If you have an event with over, I would say, 3,500 to 4,000 delegates, there's so many beacons in the room that the signal is not accurate anymore. You get overlap, you get cluttering. So RFID, BLE beacons, I would say any event up to 3,500, 4,000, that's about how high you can get of number of delegates in a specific area. Touchpoint technology. What Conduco is using, what Poken does, it's actually giving you a little tag and you have to touch the wall to get information. You see all those little touch points from Conduco. Actually, you get a tag or a beacon in your badge, and this is actually touching the technology. Or with your mobile app, it could be with the mobile app, you can touch that application, and this means I have been here and I want to receive information about this specific product or this specific provider. The only problem there is that you're relying on an action of the delegate. He needs to download the app, or he needs to actually reach out with his tag and touch that touch point. So whenever you have an action that relies on an interaction of the delegate, you will always get a lower number of... how many people did download the app? Everybody downloaded the app? No. You see, like, there's 1, 2, 3, there's almost 40% of the audience that did not download the app. So anything where you rely on an action of the delegates, whether it's BLE tracking through your mobile phone, which is what Crowd Connected does, you have to download the app, and then the app is actually connecting to the little antennas that are all over the place. You will get a sample of the audience, but you will not get the full audience, because you rely on... And you have to be honest, if you have to switch on your BLE, you have to download the app. And, well, with the new phones it's better, but if you had an iPhone 6, your battery would be dead by 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so you don't do it as a delegate. So NFC touch points, why are they used? You can actually tap, collect information, and you can do that on an exhibitor level, or you could do that on a product level. You might have a product wall with different products, and you can say, I'm interested in A, B, C, D, and you would collect that data from that specific exhibitor. Another technology which proves to be very promising is facial recognition. We've been using it at Field Drive to do the check-in, and when we piloted this like 4 or 5 years ago, it was nice to have, it was great technology, and now today we see a lot of clients shifting to facial recognition check-in because it's touchless. You can just walk up to the booth, your kiosk will scan your face and your badge will be printed automatically, so no intervention. And we see that a lot of organizers now are using that technology to, one, reduce the contact between the delegates and the organizer, but also to save on staff costs, because you can staff 5 kiosks or 4 kiosks with one hostess rather than having one hostess peeling the badge, giving you over the badge, and so on. So it's more frictionless, and it's an easier technology to check in. When you see at this one with how we previously did it, you would walk up to the camera, it would say like, hey Danny, are you Andrew? Yes, I'm Andrew, your badge would be printed. Now we've omitted that, and you just walk up to the kiosk, and we have a 99.7% accuracy of data. So we will automatically print your badge, and you will say like, oh, this is not my badge, and then you can revert the check-in process and pick up your badge, but with a very, very high accuracy rate. And we can get that high accuracy because we're actually opposed to public facial recognition. Like you see, all the cameras in London are CCTV cameras, and they also do facial recognition, but you have an audience of millions of profiles in the database and millions of people that are walking in the city, and you have to try to match them up. And they have an accuracy of maybe 11, 12% on facial recognition. We work with a relatively small audience. For IBC, we're doing the check-in in December. We will have about 25, 30,000 delegates. Comparing one photo to 35 biometric profiles is pretty straightforward with a high accuracy. If you would have to do that with a 2 million or a 5 million database, the accuracy would definitely go. Excuse me. Oh, now I need to take this microphone now. Oh no, I'm not allowed to touch it. I'm going to be sick now. So, facial recognition is definitely something we can use in other domains of the event, like tracking people in an event. Technically, we can set up cameras on your booths in a specific hall, at an entrance or an exit, and actually recognize the people that are walking in and walking out of a specific session. But data privacy is key there. You have to have consent. So when you do anything with facial recognition, you're handling biometrics data, which means that you have to comply to the whole GDPR legislation, and all the discussions are not happening with the marketing or the sales department because they're very eager to use that technology. But when you start talking to the next level, like data privacy officer, that's when you're getting into the real conversation. And we've done events for banks, for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I can tell you that the sales process doesn't happen with the marketing or the organizer department. It happens with the data privacy officer and all those requirements you have to fulfill to be able to use biometrics data. So how do we handle this? First of all, there's consent. You have to opt in and tell the delegate what he's uploading his picture for. In our case, it's just facial recognition. The photo is actually uploaded when you submit it. It's sent to a biometric server, and you have to imagine it like a fingerprint. We're just taking some reference points on that photo. We're keeping those reference points like a fingerprint, and we're deleting the photo, so we're not keeping the photo. And we're keeping that biometrics profile, which is just an array of numbers, and link that to your customer ID in the registration database. And that is key, that there is no storage of data between the biometrics profile and the actual customer data, name, profile, whatever. So the matching happens on the kiosk itself. You walk up to the kiosk and you say like the live camera streams to the biometrics server. He's recreating a biometrics profile, and when that array corresponds with the array known in the database, that's when your badge is printed. So there's a total data segregation between the biometrics profile and the customer data. Now, when you start using that in other domains, like checking people in and out, you need to go through another process of validation. Oh, I have 5 minutes left. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. So all this data that you capture are resulting in analytics dashboards, which give you an overview, either live or post-event, of how the delegates moved into the event. This is, for instance, a visual from Exposure Analytics. On a car trade show, you can actually see the red zones and the heat maps of how people move about in the event and where the most visitors were at a specific time point. Same with visitor demographics based on facial recognition cameras. You can see age, how many people in the audience had a beard. It can be one of your objectives. I can't see the beards here because everybody's wearing a face mask. But it can be one of your objectives, knowing how many people had a beard. So depending on your objectives, we're going to choose the right technology for you. And there's one little video I'd like to show you here. This is what we're actually aiming for. So this is a live dashboard of an event where you can actually see the dashboard, and all that data that we're capturing, we're bringing that together into one dashboard. And this allows you to see per delegate per event day how many people were in a specific category, how many visitors you had with a full board ticket. And you can drill them down into the different days of the event or all the days in the event happening. Secondly, we're going to look at the delegates, and you can actually define the attendee journey. You can see, where was Abram? He checked in at this time, then he went to this session, then he was tagged there by the lead retrieval, then he was scanned there on a kiosk. So we're bringing all that data together into one dashboard, giving you an overview of the actual delegate behavior in your event. And we do the same for the exhibitor. So when you look at the exhibitor dashboard, we can know exactly how many people were in that specific booth, how many CEOs visited my booth, how many people were there, how long did they stay. So this gives you a total overview of how the behavior of the delegates was in your event. And the same goes for the sessions. You can drill into a session, see how many people of a specific profile were in a session, how they attended, on which day there was more in a session. And again, drilling down that data into dashboards. And we can also show heat maps of an event. This is a floor plan. You can upload the floor plans, and those antennas can actually measure where people were at a specific... So after the event, you can actually go back and see, like, I think that free drinks or an open bar is coming up there somewhere. You see? That's definitely an open bar or free drinks. So you can see how visitors are moving throughout your event, and how many people, and even who was in that specific area at a specific time. So, and matching those data with virtual event attendees, bringing that together, that's where the real value is. So knowing your audience online and in person, that's where the data collection is going today. So you can do custom reporting and everything on that, but that's in a nutshell what you can do with track and trace technology, identified or not identified. It's a lot of information to soak in. Any questions? Oh.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions at all? Okay.
Hello. Yeah, I was wondering, for the engagement piece that you had on the analytics, it might be easier just to do this, for the engagement session that you had and you were breaking down the analytics, what is it that you're gauging as engagement? Is it touch points that people just attended, or people asked questions, or people went for a drink? Like, what are those engagement pieces?
It depends. So the question was, what are the engagement points that we're measuring? It depends on the technology you're using. If you use a beacon, then it would simply be like how many people were in this area and measuring how long they stayed in. If it's a touch point, another source of information might be lead retrieval, session scanning, or whatever. Then you would know that person visited that specific exhibitor and was also interested in this and this and this product. So depending on where the data source comes from and the technology you're using, you're going to define the touch points and the level of engagement. And if you combine that or you overlay that with the mobile app or with the virtual environment like grip or networking, you can identify. So that's why I started with pointing out the importance of the objective. What do I want to get out of it? And that's how you're going to define the technology that you're actually using for your event.
Well, Danny, I've got a question as well, actually. So you've talked about a lot of tracking technologies here. They're all fantastic. Which one do you think is the most important in our events industry moving forward in terms of the tracking?
It's got what is the most important in our industry moving forward. I think it's based on objectives and on budget. And for now, I can say that there's no technology out there that's 100% foolproof. None. You get a higher accuracy. If you look at RFID, it's an expensive deployment and it gives you low accuracy. Beacons are giving you a better accuracy. Having a mobile app reduces the accuracy based on the action of the delegate. So for now, I would say that in terms of technology, facial recognition, and even because those facial recognition cameras can also recognize QR codes. So the best result you would get is combining these technologies, where you actually have to know the data. I need to know exactly how many people are in this room. Well, use simple barcode scanning, in and out. And then combine that with other data, like biometrics data, facial recognition, beacons, and then bring that together in a dashboard where you define your objectives. And I know for certifications, I need to know exactly how many people were in this session, and if they attended, then that's an objective. What can we use? We can use barcode scanning, we can use BLE beacons, and then you're going to drill down. Then you're going to drill down the technology you're going to use to meet those objectives.
I've actually got a question here online as well, saying, what technology are you most excited for moving forward, other than Microsoft HoloLens?
I would say that the most promising is in facial recognition, identified, and the technology is also proven to be very reliable. The biggest challenge you have there is the privacy, GDPR, biometrics legislation. That's where you're going to. But in terms of strictly looking at technology, if you see how they use it in China, that's the way forward, with a very high accuracy and a very reliable technology, and it's still moving forward. But data privacy is there to protect the delegates.
Well, I think it's come to the end of the session. Thank you very much, Danny. That was very insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.